All right, welcome in, friends, to Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast supplemental. I'm John Champion,
I'm Ken Ray.
and today's not really a supplemental. At least it's not a normal supplemental. This is a couple of guys who are fans of Star Trek who have spent a lot of time looking at Leonard Nimoy's work over the years and wanted to say something and pay respects. And we'll hear a little bit later today from Rod Roddenberry. So we won't have the formality of a normal episode of Mission Log. This is just more kind of from the heart. Ken, I assume that the same thing happened to you as happened to me. You woke up and you saw on social media and on your phone and everywhere just huge reaction about the announcement of Leonard Nimoy's death. It's worth pointing out that we were recording this Saturday morning. The announcement was made Friday morning, and very quickly, a lot of people who listen to Mission Log said, "Hey, can you please record something? Can you please do something about Leonard Nimoy?" So here we are. And
actually, my wife told me before she went to work because she was up earlier than I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Where are you on it? Because I hate. I was reticent. I'll be honest. Yeah. I was reticent to do this.
Yeah.
Because I've been having like this whole weird range of things, and the thing that bothers me most is it's not about me. And I'm not saying it bothers me that it's not about me, but I don't even want to talk about what my thinking about it is, because everybody comes with something of their own, and everybody goes away with something of their own, right? I'm having this weird thing where it's like I miss the actor. I'm not. I have no feelings about Spock in this, which is kind of strange because Spock's not gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's, and I've been trying to like come up with like what that is exactly. As maligned as the JJ Trek movies are among a lot of people, there's actually something really neat about having had Leonard Nimoy be a part of that universe, because it's not like a blessing exactly, but it's almost like a handing it off from one to another. It gives it a little bit more legitimacy than just, hey, Paramount's going to make a buck on Star Trek.
Yeah. The
weird thing to me is most of my like fond memories and most of my fond associations of Nimoy have nothing to do with Star Trek.
Really?
I know that's very odd, but I think it's because Star Trek was always on in the background from the time I was a little kid, and so there's Spock. And the real revelation of Nimoy to me was, I think that there was a TV show called Lights, Camera, Action. They used to be on Nickelodeon. And what it was it was a behind-the-scenes look at all these movies. It was mostly science fiction movies or comedies. Like I remember one that was Superman 3. I remember seeing all the clips from Superman 3, behind-the-scenes stuff of Superman 3. But it was hosted by Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, cool.
And he would do these little things like where he would teach you a little bit about movies, sort of in between those clips. And I don't know why, but like there are things that stick in my head that he said from that, and it was sort of like a neat, like, oh, wait a minute, that's not just that guy, that's also this guy. And then when he directed 3 Men and a Baby.
Yeah, right.
It's right. Like, the revelation was, and I guess this is, certainly this is a Star Trek message throughout Leonard Nimoy's life that had nothing to do with Star Trek. This one thing that you think he is, it turns out that's not all he is. And I don't know. There's something that's I miss the guy. I'm not having the whole Spock is gone moment thing, because Spock's not. Spock's an idea. And Spock transcends.
Yeah.
I'm sad about the loss of Nimoy, though.
Yeah. It's worth saying that, neither of us knew Leonard Nimoy in person, so we can't really talk to what he was like in his real life. But, we got a lot of email and we got a lot of social media feedback, and there's one in particular that I kind of wanted to start with today, because I thought at least it could put into context how we could even justify doing this show. And this is from Zach, and he said, I do not have many Trek fans among my immediate family or friends, so listening to you each week is the deepest conversation about the shows and movies I can be a part of. You will undoubtedly be flooded with those of us uncertain where to go or how to feel about Leonard Nimoy's passing. I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to meet him, but I know I certainly didn't. Yet I am currently choked up, something that didn't happen when Robin Williams passed last year, and he was arguably in my life longer than Mr. Nimoy was. I think I would have felt this way at the passing of D. Kelly, Jimmy Doohan, or Mr. Roddenberry, or most recently Mrs. Barrett Roddenberry, had I been more conscious of Trek at the time. I don't know if you're going to say anything next week, or if you even should, but I think we all feel it, and I thank you guys specifically for fostering that connection and getting us all talking together. So hearing that, I kind of get it, Mission Log, and you and I are both very thankful for this, that it has become a conversational show. And one of my great joys is that whenever an episode gets published, we immediately hear back from people, and they love it, they hate it, they're moved by it, whatever. And that's really, really cool. But now we have something in real life where a figure who has affected a lot of people, then we get to put that into a kind of context and continue that conversation. The conversation gets a new piece of nuance because we're talking about something in real life. And by the way, it's also worth mentioning that Maurice Hurley, executive producer of Next Gen first and second season, also passed away this week.
Yeah.
And that got attention in the social media sphere as well. Can we say a listener's name? Are you okay with that? Somebody Sure,
who didn't
of course.
write into us?
Of course, yeah.
I hope hi Inez. It's so weird to me to hear from Zach. I don't know Zach. I've never talked to Zach, and that's true of most people who listen to this show. You know, and that's somebody that we talk to, and I may be saying her name wrong, and I hope I'm not. I try to be good about that. We see her once a year in Vegas, and she talks about the exact same thing. How when she's at home, I mean, she doesn't have the whole Trek thing. Yeah, so I'm going to be very touchy-feely here. Everybody who is feeling that way right now, this is the...
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hugging you. All right, there, I said it. I hate that. I hate that kind of thing, but it's so sad to think about people not... Yeah, all right, so fine, you've justified us being here.
All right, good.
Thank you. I appreciate
Good.
that. I feel much... both better and more maudlin now.
Yeah, right.
Now that we're halfway through it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're talking to people who already get it. We're talking to people who are already feeling something, and maybe not were shocked at the news because we knew that Nimoy had been admitted to the hospital, and maybe over the last few years was not as well as he had been. So it's not shocking and sudden, but certainly just as sad. And it was a day that kind of we hoped would never come. I remember actually being at a convention, and it might have been the 2011 convention in Vegas when he gave his sort of final farewell show. And this was really interesting. I wish that you had been there, Ken, because instead of the usual actor goes on stage, maybe says a few things, and then you just open it up to Q&A, and then the Q&A is, what was your favorite episode? What did you think about that? It wasn't that at all. It was Nimoy behind a podium with a prepared, I have to say it was nearly an hour long, but a prepared monologue. And then he ran a PowerPoint slideshow behind him with all these shots of, from him being a little boy and being in the Army, and then coming to Hollywood in his first roles, Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and everything that came after. And he just did this like one-man show that summed up his life and his career, and he got choked up, and the audience in its entirety got choked up. And it was a really incredible event. And I was sitting next to my girlfriend in the audience. Hi, Mary. And she said, at that point, or maybe shortly after, she said, we're going to come to a convention one day and he won't be here. Because we had heard that would be his last thing, but we didn't really believe it, because sometimes you just don't believe it when somebody says, this is my farewell tour. I've seen The Who too many times to know that, to believe it.
Right.
But she said, we're going to come back to this one day and he won't be here. And I think that'll be the hardest loss for me to take, that he is this massive presence. And we've had deaths in the Star Trek family before, but for some reason, just that one she knew and I knew by her saying it was going to be that much harder to take than almost any other. Yeah. A couple of things that came up to me when I was thinking about this. One of the reasons, and I wanted to read that from Zach, is that we know that we're talking to an audience of Star Trek fans, and the thing that hit me yesterday when I'm sort of out in the real world is that here I was faced with hundreds and hundreds of comments from people talking about this person that we all had kind of a shared knowledge of, and how difficult it would be to put Leonard Nimoy and Spock into context of importance in that world, but then trying to talk about how this was important and meaningful to people who are not Star Trek fans, because yes, I have a lot of friends who are not Star Trek fans, and a few of them reached out to me yesterday saying, "Hey, I heard about Spock. Really sorry about that." And boy, that must be tough. And I tried to, because a couple of them wanted to carry on the conversation a little further, and I tried to think of a way to express how big a deal this is and how important this is. And I was trying to say, well, it goes back to the character and the thing that you and I did for so long on Mission Log and continue to do on Mission Log, talking about these characters who explore humanity. When I said in a statement on Facebook that Star Trek is about humanity and Spock is that heart, I was sincere about that, and I think that still holds up. That on a show that tries so hard to say something about the human condition and ask the big questions, what it means to be human, you have to have that character, whether it's Spock or it's Data, or you go a little further out and it's the Doctor on Voyager or Seven of Nine. That's what the whole show revolves around. So even when you take away the spaceships and the phasers and the bumpy-headed aliens, you're left with somebody there who gets to be that mirror image to say, who am I and what is this all about? And for me, I think that's why the character resonates so deeply. And
there's also something that happened in the movies. I mean, you think about Star Trek as being this like 1960s TV show, right? And it would be very easy to say, well, so there was that character, and that was that cool character, and he was always this. No, he was never a human, and it was all the sort of Saturday afternoon rerun, sort of encapsulated like 5 minutes while you're passing through the room, things that might be happening on the screen. From Star Trek 1, or from Star Trek the Motion Picture, through Star Trek 6, you have growth of that character again. You have growth of all of those characters again. And maybe that's part of what makes it so difficult as well. I mean, this is not... I was trying to think of like another iconic, television person who died that would have had the same kind of effect. And I think for a few reasons that you're not going to hit on that many, because you don't get that kind of, from 1960s television, you generally speaking don't get that kind of growth of a character, first of all. But then you don't get a chance for a character to live like so many times again. Yeah. And that's not a search for Spock joke. I mean, it's just
right.
That's just, I mean, even from Star Trek the Motion Picture to Star Trek 4, you're dealing with a completely different character because they kept growing that. And there's something I don't want to conflate the character and the guy, but there is something about, I think probably because he had such a guiding hand on, I mean, he directed 3 and 4. So, I mean, Nimoy had a big guiding hand in how Star Trek got to keep going at that point. It didn't fall back on, not to bash the current movies, but Star Trek 2, I mean, Star Trek Into Darkness felt in a lot of ways like more of the same, many ways over. First of all, it was Star Trek 2 just done over again, but additionally it was just like, okay, well, we had explosions in the last one and fast ships, so let's have bigger explosions and bigger ships this time.
Right.
It felt like more of the same. And you had in those middle two movies, in Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4, you did not have more of the same. You had decidedly different from 2 to 3 and from 3 to 4. Mm-hmm. And that's largely due to this guy. I mean, it's all hard to pull apart and separate.
I think, yeah. Well, there's a couple of things you said that make me think. It seems like there was a point, and I'm sure that this happened for every actor on Star Trek, or would happen to any actor on any kind of major show, but you're done with it, and you're done with it, and that's it, and I don't have to talk about it again. Mm-hmm. And as we have picked apart many times on our show, Star Trek was different, and it took on this other life, maybe in part because it was canceled and because fans had to sort of take it under their own wing and keep that keep that idea alive until new Star Trek came out. So there was a kind of ownership over it. But, as far as the actor is concerned, they're sort of done with it. I did that job. Now I'm looking for the next job. And Nimoy even came out with that book, I Am Not Spock. Right.
Right.
And in context of the book, because I was a chapter in the book, in context of the book, that makes sense. He's talking about himself as opposed to the character of Spock. But there were fans who took that the wrong way and think, wow, he's just severing all ties. He's denying it, blah, blah, blah. But realistically and rightfully so, the actor has to make a separation with the character. But then I think something happened, and it might have been out of the professional necessity of there being more Star Trek being made when you go from the animated series to the movies. And then, as you mentioned, Nimoy taking over as director on a couple of those movies, where I really feel like he did the homework. And that's why I was so struck with his farewell performance, his farewell speech at Creation, because I feel like there are a lot of actors who can kind of just wind them up and let them go, put them on stage, and they'll talk and they'll answer questions, and then they'll sign autographs and they're done and great. And you, if you got your $50 worth to get that autograph, fantastic, good on you. But I do feel like there was some point where Nimoy stopped looking at it as just, well, here's this role that I played once, and started looking at it as, here's a role that has meaning and impact for a lot of people, and I need to figure out why that is and be able to speak to it. And then he did, and I think he did in a more eloquent and interesting way than a lot of other actors that I've seen talk about their roles. So I always respected that, and I thought that was an interesting thing about him.
Is it? All right, so Data's looking for humanity. Data's trying to be human. Spock was not trying to be human. Spock was trying to not be human. What is it about that character that speaks so much to our humanity?
Well, that's the thing that I...
And is that Nimoy or is that Spock? I mean, that's another question, but a separate question, except I don't know that you can separate any of these. I don't mean to sound Pollyanna when I say Spock's not dead, but Spock's not dead. I mean, that's the cool thing about Spock. He is an idea.
Right.
All of Star Trek is an idea that is not necessarily being handled as well or as fully as a lot of people might like right now, but the idea doesn't die.
Yeah.
In the way that Star Wars died for a while. I mean, is there something, and maybe it's because you got so much TV, or maybe because you've got so many novels or so much fan fiction. I don't know what it is exactly, but there's something about it that I mean, Star Trek in a lot of ways is like a bed bug or a roach or something. It's not going to die. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be as healthy as you want it to be, but it's not going anywhere.
Right.
But that whole thing of is it Spock's? I mean, what is it? What is it about that character, or what is it about that actor? And is it the two, or are they separate? Or talk to me about his humanity or his lack thereof, and why that speaks so much to humans.
Right. Well, that's so. Let's talk about the second part of the question first, because the second part of the question is,
there were like 18 parts of that question.
There were.
Okay, but let's talk about the second one.
Right, but one of the questions was Leonard Nimoy the actor versus Spock the character, and how indelibly linked they are. I do think that they are indelibly linked, and Zachary Quinto does a great job playing Spock, and it helps that he resembles young Nimoy, and it helps that you can kind of embody that as an actor. However, there is something so unique about Leonard Nimoy's portrayal, and who knows, if it had been Martin Landau, we might have been talking about Martin Landau and how incredibly connected to that character he was. So again, it might just be sort of luck of the draw that you got the right actor at the right time in the right character to be able to play it. And you also have that good fortune of filming that second pilot where Nimoy the actor has a very different actor in Shatner to play off of than he did with Jeffrey Hunter. So all these sort of accidental things that came together, but they help the actor to inform the character. And once that magic was made, well, when the other writers step up to the plate and say, when DC Fontana says, I want to explore more about the Spock character, and maybe that's because she saw Nimoy do something great, or maybe at that point they realized, hey, Spock is getting more fan mail now than Kirk is getting, So you can kind of drive the stories to explore that. So if we're asking what comes first, the chicken or the egg, was it the actor or was it the writer or was it the character or what? Well, we may not truly know what came first and what kicked that off, but it is the right combination of those things that came together to kick that off. I was talking to somebody yesterday about how when we talk about big figures who leave an impression and then they're gone and people kind of have to deal with it. I was saying, look, I've been alive when presidents have died, and I've been alive when famous actors have died, and all kinds of people that you think of that leave an impression. But I was saying to this person who is not a Star Trek fan, this is a character who not only fans have seen evolve for 40 years, more than 40 years. You think about it, Spock was there in the 1965 pilot, The Cage, and he was there in the 2013 J.J. Abrams movie. Right. That's remarkable. It's remarkable that anybody would get to play a character for that long, given all the ups and downs. And
that character changes over that time.
Yes. And I think that's the important thing, because the character is the character central to Star Trek that asks, who am I? We could pose a lot of things about Kirk and about McCoy. Kirk is driven by ideals. Kirk is driven by duty. Kirk is a person who looks to do the right thing and sort of make his stamp on the world, stamp his name on the universe. McCoy is a character who is compassionate and asks what is the right thing for other people. How do my decisions affect other people? But Spock is the character whose motivating question is, who am I and what is my place in this world? And I'm glad that you mentioned the movies. I'm glad that you mentioned that arc, because we spent more than an hour talking about the motion picture, and I talked about how much I love that movie and how I think it's so critical to understanding Spock, the Spock who came before and the Spock who came after. If you don't have that movie where Spock finally reconciles his emotional being, then I don't think you necessarily get that Spock, and you don't get that moment that we have at the end of The Wrath of Khan. Or at least if we did, I think it would have played out a little differently. But you had to have that moment come with V'ger to inform that character. And it's kind of a beautiful thing then to see this character who others sort of made fun of for being logical, and as you like to point out, Ken, using the org chart to his advantage. Yeah. It's a great moment to see that character then decide, I can act emotionally because I care for my friends more than I care for logic. It's a big moment. And as I was talking to this friend of mine yesterday, saying, there aren't many characters who are that big and that popular who speak to an existential feeling that other human beings have. James Bond is a huge character. I will be devastated when Sean Connery goes or Roger Moore goes, and I will look upon those James Bond movies fondly. But James Bond is a cool character who gets the girl and takes out the bad guy and drives a cool car. James Bond is not a character who has an existential crisis or an existential problem who deals with his emotional side. Spock is a rare breakout character in the pop culture who does something incredibly profound. And I think that's maybe why people feel this loss greater than they feel other losses of, let's face it, an actor playing a role.
Yeah. There's something about it. I find myself, and this is weird, and I don't know if I should say it out loud. You're editing this show, though, so you can edit it out if you want to.
I won't.
I find myself, honestly, there have been many times that I've wished that Star Trek was on television again or still. In my head, the J.J. Abrams young Spock is dealing with the loss of Spock Prime. And this is a character that you can actually, and I don't even feel like that's sacrilegious to say. I don't feel like that's it. I mean, there are some things where you would do that, like if Chris Pine was mourning the loss of, the Shatner character, that would that to me would feel cheesy and weird. But I mean, you're right. This has been Spock's examination all the way through, and you've actually, if this were TV, if it were on TV, I would expect there to be a sort of acknowledgement of that and even more in-depth look at, okay, so now who am I with that gone? It is very strange. This is Wagon Train in the Stars, right? It is very strange to be talking about such existential topics with the pointy-eared guy, the guy who was supposed to look like the devil. I mean, that was pretty much that was yeah.
I was the only person that I could kind of think, and everybody's different. Everybody is affected by the loss of someone in a different way. But I was trying to think of another popular figure who may have had as profound an effect when they were lost. And I was thinking somebody like Walt Disney. Here's somebody that you see, if you were a kid in the 50s and 60s and you saw this person on TV every week, and it wasn't just that you saw the person on TV every week, it's that the person represented an idea. And the person represented this, physically, a theme park that you go to and have a good time and create memories. But those stories get linked and interwoven with kind of the fabric of your childhood and the way you look at the world. So I would imagine that had I been born when Walt Disney died, I could imagine that would have a pretty profound effect on people.
There's something, Disney, it speaks to who you are. Who affects you speaks to who you are. My mother was torn apart when Elvis died. And my mother was torn apart again when John Lennon died.
Yeah.
And it speaks to who you are and what's important for you. There's Steve Jobs. Jobs. So my other thing that I do is I do a daily Mac news show, and I used to do for a while, about a year and a half, 2 years, I did a live show on Wednesday nights. And Steve Jobs died on a Wednesday afternoon, and so we did this whole like people just sort of getting together on the phone basically for an hour and a half. Going, man, yeah, it's very weird to think though. I remember when Lucille Ball died, and it's like, oh, well, that's sad. You know, I remember when Andy Griffith died, and I really liked Andy Griffith, and so it's like, oh, that's sad. Leonard Nimoy dies, and you're like, you know, I mean, you don't even get to the part of, oh, that's sad. It's like, what? So what now?
Yeah,
in a way, despite the fact that he hasn't been. It's very strange. I mean, there is this sort of what now thing, even though he's not been part of a continuing thing for quite a while, except that he's been part. And then we have the weird, I mean, there's the whole weird social media thing too. I mean, we're at a weird place now with our celebrity. He posted a tweet on the 22nd. That was the last tweet that he posted. It was on February 22nd.
Yeah.
We get to live with our celebrities in a way now that we never have before. It used to be like Look magazine, right? Or maybe Life, or maybe Page 5 of whatever newspaper, the Liz Smith column, things like that. And now, you know, there's a chance that your favorite star is going to see something that you say to them and say something back to you. I mean, we live, had he passed 10 years ago, I don't know that there would necessarily be quite the same thing, because we're walking around in his pocket now, you know, and in the pocket of all these, Takei obviously is just masterful at his whole social media thing, but despite the fact that he hasn't been Spock, with the exception of, you know, the turns in the J.J. Trek movies for a while, I mean, he's actually been a bigger part of our lives in a way, and that's going to be true of almost every celebrity out there now. Yeah. With notable exceptions who absolutely hate Twitter and won't go on it. We all get to be a bit closer to that guy than we did when he was coming into our home every week.
Well, I think it's definitely that, and you know, for Star Trek fans, again, going through this ride of 40 plus years, where here's somebody that you could meet and you could talk to, and you could go to a convention and get a picture with him and all that. So he becomes that much more real. And then, if you've got a notification on your phone, oh, look, he just tweeted something, he just said something, and then interacted with other people. Yeah, the closeness is compounded because of things like social media, but then Star Trek has been and continues to be this other special thing that a lot of other pop culture phenomena don't get to enjoy, that they don't have this closeness among fans, you know, fans to other fans, but then fans to the actual actors and writers and producers and creators of this of this storyline. So yeah, it's such a unique combination, and then I think all the bits and pieces about Nimoy the person that we've picked up, they make it feel that much more sincere, that much more profound a loss. So many people I've seen write have said, this is like losing a grandfather, you know? So in the years, you know, when he got into his 70s and 80s, and it's funny, just last night I was watching the Bruno Mars video for Lazy Day. You know,
I have not seen that yet. I will tell you what I've watched several times though is the Audi commercial.
Yeah, right.
with him doing the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins, and and playing with Quinto as well, going into giving him the Vulcan nerve pinch, and, you know, leaving him laying there on the pavement. I mean, there was a fun about the whole thing. I mean, and you can talk about Shatner doing Get a Life, and you can talk about Shatner doing the like the Captain's movies and things like that. There's something about it's goofy, because I know he got paid for the Audi commercial. It's not like, you know, this was actually, you know, following him around on a Saturday afternoon, but he was very comfortable with where he had gone with Spock, it seems. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of fun being had there. Yeah, which is kind of a neat thing. It's not even like it's, you know, making fun of the character or having fun at his own expense. It's just, I mean, he thoroughly enjoyed that at the end of it, it seems.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was saying with the whole "I am not Spock" thing, because of course he followed it up with a book called "I Am Spock." Right? You know?
Right.
Yeah. So that I think that's what's pretty great. I guess, like I said, at a certain point, maybe it's just necessity. If you realize, well, okay, I'm always going to be known for this thing, and maybe it's an albatross around my neck at one way. I could look at it that way,
right?
But I could also look at it as this is something that has touched a lot of people and really try to figure out why and how that happened. And Ken, I think that's what you and I do every week on Mission Log is we sit there and try to figure out why is it that a show, just a TV show, I mean, it's just a show, it is something that people talk about and are deeply affected by and sort of incorporate into their moral and ethical and philosophical fabric.
Because it's not just a show; it's moral and philosophical and ethical and all those things that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a roadmap or a star chart or however you want to say it. So,
yeah, but at the center of that, and again, I kind of go back to the question of is that then at the end of the day what Star Trek is all about? Is asking the question, who am I or who are we as people? Well, what is our purpose and why are we here? And Spock got to act that out. Spock got to be the center, the dramatic representation of that question. And then lucky for us, a brilliant actor got to inhabit that role. And there are a lot of great roles out there in the world. And there are a lot of great pop culture phenomena out there in the world. But this is the rare place where that pop culture thing got to be that profound and got to be that introspective through that character. If you sat down and said, okay, I'm going to write a story and this story will be about what is at the very core of humanity, I would look at you in Starbucks with your MacBook Air and go, yeah, you and 100 other people who are sitting in this Starbucks trying to write the next great American screenplay.
Okay, first of all, you're doing it wrong because you should be at the Coffee Bean and Tea Company.
Yeah, well, there are fewer of those now, sadly.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
But yeah, this is the rare place where it works and it resonates over time.
And speaking of time, forgive me. I mean, it also hit at the right time.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent the whole time that we were talking about the original series, talking about the upheaval that was going on in the country at that time as well.
Yeah.
He was not a guru to lead people by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, to have somebody sitting there every week trying to figure out their place in the universe while people are sitting at home trying to figure out their place in the universe in ways that they didn't necessarily in the 50s or the 80s or, heck, name another decade. I mean, that was in a lot of ways, the country was sort of waking up to a number of different things at the time. And I mean, so certainly you're right. There's a huge confluence there. It's not the same as when you lose like a Lucille Ball, who was bigger in television than Leonard Nimoy was. It's not the same as when you lose an Andy Griffith, who was, arguably as big in television, if not bigger than Leonard Nimoy was. There's a lot that goes into that moment, and that makes us lost harder, I'd say.
Yeah. And people, even if people didn't feel like they knew the person, people felt like they knew that character and they were deeply affected by that character. Your Christmas movie is The Wrath of Khan. I could not watch that yesterday. And I don't know when I'll be able to watch that again. That's why I watched the Bruno Mars video, because it was hilarious. and it's old Nimoy. It's just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And he's in a bathrobe and he's grumpy. And I really needed that to laugh, because every time I looked at a picture of young Spock, I would get choked up. And I know that Mary was having a difficult time yesterday, and she went to the Star on the Walk of Fame and went to the Leonard Nimoy Theater here at the Observatory. And the director of the Observatory had written a statement then that whoever was sort of leading the theater presentation that day read. And it was a very short statement. It was maybe like 3 or 4 sentences, and he couldn't get through it. And he absolutely broke down reading it. So stuff like that, I would see and hear glimpses of all day long, and sort of catch myself and go, yeah, I can't watch that scene in Wrath of Khan.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly there are other scenes in other Star Trek that I will find sort of a new way to look at now. But yeah, but I needed the funny stuff. So if you haven't watched that video, Ken, do definitely watch it.
All right.
and I'll go back and watch the Audi commercial.
Yeah, go back and watch the Audi commercial.
It is hilarious. Yeah.
And I'll watch the Bruno Mars video.
Yeah. If you guys haven't been paying attention to social media, Twitter and Facebook in particular, we've just had tremendous comments on Facebook, some really, really heartfelt stuff. And if you're not on Twitter and you miss some of the comments, some of these are great. William Shatner said, "I loved him like a brother. We will all miss his humor, his talent, and his capacity to love." Zachary Quinto, I think his was just terrifically poetic. He said, "My heart is broken. I love you profoundly, my dear friend, and I will miss you every day. Many flights." There were a lot of great comments. Seth MacFarlane, Kevin Smith. So take a look online and dig through some of those. And Ken, I pulled some comments from some of our listeners. We got some great emails and some great comments online. So I'll start with one here. Chris Gooley wrote in and said, "Mr. Spock was the first face of Star Trek. He received more fan mail than Captain Kirk. He was an unlikely sex symbol, the 1960s version of weird hotness." Mr. Spock defined the Vulcan race at the same time his personal conflicts made him a partial outcast from that race. This dichotomy could have been so easily overacted, yet Nimoy portrayed this duality with a nuance which, looking back, can only be called brilliant. Spock's outcast nature resonated deeply with millions of people. Part of the optimism of Star Trek is that even outcasts can find a home. Spock's story is exactly that. He finds himself and his family in perhaps the most unlikely of places, on a starship with beautifully imperfect people who accepted him even when they didn't completely understand him. His death is producing a tangible pain in my heart, as though I lost someone I knew. To an extent, millions of fans did know him, as he revealed later in his life that there was much more of himself in the character of Spock than he was at one time willing to admit. That was nicely said. Weird hotness. We should all be so lucky.
Yes. Yes.
Got another good one here. Tim Robertson, who said, "I was sitting in my office this morning when the tweets started coming in. I started at the first one that seemed like forever. Then I started scrolling, the images, the words. Yeah, I knew he was sick, but it's Spock. He rose from the dead before. Then my eyes filled with tears. I got up from my chair and closed my office door. I came across an image of Spock and McCoy from Wrath of Khan. The only word was remember. The tears started flowing. I could not stop. Leonard Nimoy was gone. I met him a few times at various Star Trek conventions, always a warm and caring man. He was an icon." Ron said, "This is a tough one, like losing a family member." And yeah, I think that's how a lot of fans have expressed that. Judy Conway, replying to one of the mission log posts, said, "Thanks for posting this. My eyes are filled with tears. He was a huge part of my life." And Ken, my favorite actually is from Anna Maltese, who wrote, "No, you're the one who's been crying their eyes out all day long." So good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. We're on to you. Hey, Rod, thanks for joining me. Ken and I just, we spent some time talking and sharing some emails and comments from Mission Log listeners. And I have to say that we talked about how to do this show, and we figured that there's one way to do it where we play a bunch of clips and, play a bunch of audio of Nimoy as Spock, and we thought it's probably better and more genuine if we just wing it. So
Yeah.
that's what we did.
I agree. The genuine part of it resonates with me. Obviously, a lot of people and some news agencies kind of reached out to me and they wanted a quote and all that. So, of course, we put a quote together, and the quote was genuine in terms of where it came from, but it sounded like everyone else's quote. I mean, this is a tremendous loss. I mean, every time I say something, it just sounds so prefabricated. I didn't know Leonard Nimoy that well. I didn't know him at all. Obviously, he had the relationship with my father and the rest of the cast. So in terms of a personal loss as losing a friend, I don't necessarily have that feeling. But of course, the overall loss in Star Trek and then everyone else, no one wants anyone to lose anyone. So yes, it's genuine when I say my heart goes out to his family. And you know where my heart really goes? Mm-hmm. It really goes out to all the people who were kind of brought up with Star Trek in their lives where that character really meant something to them. For all the, I'm going to stereotype here, for all the geeks and the nerds and the outcasts, anyone who didn't feel like they were part of the crew. Spock was that character. Spock was the one who stood out and in many cases, allowed us to look at ourselves, allowed us to look at our own humanity. So my heart really goes out to the people who really grew up with him, the actor, the character, and really loved the character. That's where my love and heart goes to. And of course, the family as well, but that's where I'm coming at it from.
Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of the difficulty is that neither Ken nor I knew him. I had one little anecdote about running into him backstage somewhere, and I shared that on Facebook because it was just sort of a nice story. But I can't claim to have known him in any sense of the word. But I think what's so interesting and what Ken and I really talked about was what is the impact on pop culture and what is the impact on that personal level with fans. So I wanted to ask you and kind of frame that question to you in a slightly different way. When you set us out to do Mission Log, it was partly selfish. It was partly you saying, I want an excuse to watch Star Trek and think about and analyze Star Trek and kind of do that along with us and do that through us. And I'm wondering if by doing that in sort of a measured and studied way over the last couple of years, since we got through the majority of the Spock stories, we'll have a little taste of Spock a little later on. But did your impression or framing of the character change at all in doing that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this isn't about saying how great of a job you guys are doing. I mean, I've said it before. The way that you guys, the attention that you give to this show has blown me away. And yes, it was an excuse to sort of rewatch these episodes and do what so many did before, which is sort of geek out about them afterwards. But listening to the kinds of things that you guys pull out of these shows, has dramatically affected my view on Star Trek. Now, it hasn't altered it. It's definitely a positive view. Now, in terms of the Spock character, I would say yes. My respect and appreciation for the character has grown after you guys. I mean, the animated series was a series that I had never watched. And what was it, Yesteryear?
Yeah.
Even though that was animation, it was still written by, I don't know who it was written by. You're pretty good with those.
DC.
Yeah, well, it was written by someone who was part of the backbone of Star Trek. And so she knew the characters fantastically. And, I was thinking, Leonard Nimoy, I was trying to figure out my feelings between Leonard Nimoy and the character of Spock, meaning, I don't want to say which will be missed more, because that's just disrespectful in any way you look at it. But what I was trying to figure out is, had Leonard Nimoy not come to the part, not been cast for the part of Spock, I don't know who that character would be today. I do know that he, as well as any actor, brings the character to life, brings his or her, in this case, his own views of the character. And Leonard Nimoy made Spock. So they aren't separate. They are one and the same. And it is just something that I think about a lot. How is Spock going to live on? And it really is in the memory. I mean, it's cliche to say, but in just the same way my father. Everyone lives on in memory. And you know what the best part is? CBS and Paramount aren't keeping Star Trek alive per se. It's I keep calling it fandom, but it's fans. It's the people out there who love the show. So I mean, that's where Star Trek's going to live on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were trying to figure out what is it about a single character. You know, we've lost actors before, and we've lost important public figures before, but what is it about this single character that has resonated with so many? And I'm sure that you saw it as well, you know, as soon as you looked at social media, as soon as you started hearing comments on the news of people saying this one felt like losing a family member. This one felt like losing a grandpa or, you know, a favorite uncle or something like that. But there was something so close between the character on screen and then the heart and mind of the viewer watching it. And I think that's what's been so interesting, but also so difficult to try to pick apart here. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's perhaps, you know, too grand of a statement to make, but I definitely think there's truth to it. You know, I think Leonard Nimoy, Spock, was Star Trek. And by that I mean, you've got all these humans, you know, on the bridge, and then you've got this alien character. And it's always the aliens, at least in Star Trek, that show us our humanity. So I think, you know, he was so popular, and he's been so popular for decades for a reason. It's the character, as you described, that people have just grown to really love, respect, and admire because we've learned so much from that character. So all the rest of the cast makes Star Trek what it is. But in terms of, you know, I always come at it from what my father brought to the series, and I think he really brought a lot of the philosophy. Mm-hmm. So I think the character of Spock really is what made Star Trek from my father's point of view, because that was the one that asked the next question and made us think deep down, what does it mean to be human?
I could not agree with you more, and I really thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks.